Welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian-Wei. On today's program, South Korea is in the midst of an influence peddling scandal after evidence showed that President Park's friend influenced the state affairs. Will Park listen to demands for her resignation, or will she survive the storm? And days before U.S. polls opened, the FBI chief announced the reopening of an investigation into unsecured emails from Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton. With little concrete details on their content, will this last-minute intervention affect voters' decisions? And we begin today's program with political intrigue in South Korea. President Park is now grappling with an influence peddling scandal involving her old friend Choi Soon-sil. Ms. Choi has returned home from abroad and is now under investigation. Opposition parties in South Korea demand a thorough investigation. An angry public is calling Ms. Park to step down. So how will the government deal with this crisis?
Rising indignation. Choi Soon-sil, the woman at the center of South Korean President Park Geun-hye's scandal, has returned to the nation and presented herself at the prosecutor's office for investigation. A longtime friend of President Park with no governmental role, she's accused of influence peddling and interfering in state affairs and exploiting her links with the president for financial gain. 60-year-old Choi is the daughter of shadowy religious cult leader Choi Tae-min, who was President Park's mentor until his death in 1994. The scandal has triggered massive public outrage in South Korea. Thousands of people rallied in Seoul on Saturday, mocking Park as a puppet president and holding posters reading "Step Down, Park Geun-hye."
The crisis revealed that President Park Geun-hye has neither the ability nor capacity to administer the government.
I believe the Park administration should resign and that Park should step down immediately.
President Park's televised apology over the scandal last week failed to defuse the situation, only sparking widespread accusations of mismanagement.
I'm sorry that the scandal has caused national concerns. I deeply apologize to the people. After I was sworn into office, I heard her opinions on some materials for a certain period, but I stopped after the presidential advisory system was established.
Park on Sunday accepted the resignations of some top presidential aides, including her chief of staff. However, the reshuffle of her administration is unlikely to boost her all-time low support rate. President Park, the first female leader in South Korea, enjoyed a high level of popularity during her first 3 years in office. But an underperforming economy, controversial foreign policies and poor public communication have dragged her down in recent years. So how will she get over this crisis?
And for more discussion on the Republic of Korea's scandal we are having in Beijing, Mr. Yang Xi-yu, Senior Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies, joining us from Washington, D.C. in the U.S. We're having Young-jung Lim, who is lecturer of Korea Studies at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Joining us from Boston, also in the U.S., is Catherine Moon, professor of Wesley College and also non-resident senior fellow of the Brookings Institution. Welcome to the three of you. A big story exploding right now in South Korea. Ms. Lim, may I invite your advice, because you're coming originally from South Korea. Is it possible President Park be able to survive this round of crisis after she reshuffling the administration for now?
It's hard to actually judge everything at this moment. As you just reported, Ms. Choi Soon-sil is now under the investigation in the prosecutor's office, which means we don't know exactly what kind of illegal things or wrongdoings were made by this lady and the President Park Geun-hye. So it takes time to see again the real responsibility. But as you're right, I mean, it's very hard time for the President Park and the presidential office office. This scandal has been unprecedented, and it's really hard to manage with all this, angers or resentment from the Korean public. So probably what President Park Geun-hye she can do at this moment is she really needs to be cooperative with this investigation. And another thing is she also needs to be decisive and cooperative to mitigate the power vacuum situations.
I see. We'll go to some of the parts you just mentioned, but Professor Moon in Boston, let me ask you about this. President Park, she said two things that she has interacted with Ms. Choi, her friend, about state affairs. One is to let her to edit some of her speeches, and the other is to let her give some advice and provide some PR help. That's all she admitted, Park Geun-hye, the president. However, Ms. Choi, when talking to the prosecutor, after meeting the prosecutor, she came out and said, I'm supposed to face death. That's what she said. She said, I should. There seems to be quite a difference between what President Park said and what Ms. Choi wanted to admit.
Well, I don't think we should take Ms. Choi's very, very dramatic emotional comment too seriously. Culturally, Koreans have a tendency, especially when they feel horrible guilt and also a sense of shame, to come out and say these very dramatic, what we would call exaggerated statements. She is probably feeling a lot of guilt and remorse, but also she's probably very confused and also does not want to hurt the president more than the president already has been hurt. So I would not take her comments as any admission of legal guilt, but the fact that she feels severe remorse, that is a fact. I think in terms of President Park, we have to keep in mind, did she violate any kind of national laws regarding the sharing of state secrets? Because Ms. Che had no security clearance, has no constituency, no representation, and in a democracy, all those things matter very much. So if there was no law that was violated, then this would become, on a legal level, a very different case. Now that's different from the way the public has been responding, because the public is in absolute disarray and chaos and emotional grief over these kinds of allegations.
Professor Moon, on the other hand, there's another detail, that is whether Ms. Choi had or is having any influence on President Park for the latter's decision on national affairs. That's also another part of the question, almost as important as whether there's state secrecy. So what do you make of that, given the fact, Professor Moon, that they are friends for a long time, and President Park was involved with the religious cult established by Ms. Choi's father, Mr. Choi, from when she was quite young, and that actually has been admitted and approved by Ms. Park's father, then the president of South Korea. Complicated. Tell us about your thought.
There are a couple thoughts that come to mind. The first is that if Ms. Che had been a government official, if she had classified clearance and a position, she would have been entitled to certain kinds of information and state secrets. But given that she did not have such a position or security clearance, if she had direct influence on state policy, such as the closing of the Kaesong industrial complex, which has exacerbated relations with North Korea even more than it was, then we're in a very big problem. If she had given influence on President Park's Dresden speech, the famous Dresden speech, which laid out a new direction for South Korea's relations with North Korea, then we are in very bad ground. However, in terms of President Park's affiliation with this cult religion, I think we have to be very careful. If she did not let these individuals influence her daily decision-making, then one could say it's her personal misjudgment. If she let them actually have power, then it's different. One thing that I think we need to be we need to keep in mind, President Park, this is part of a larger problem with President Park's decision-making style. She has kept advisors to a very small group. And so she has gone inward and more inward. And it doesn't, to me, it makes sense that she had basically been misled or misguided because of this very small inner circle who does not want to criticize her or who does not want to critique her.
Ms. Lim, I think there are several issues that mentioned by Professor Moon and you earlier. 3 words, if I could use. One is about President Park's legacy, if there still can be any left. Secondly, it's about legal issues involving her decision-making process. And thirdly, it's about her style of leadership, if we can still use that word to describe her. 3 words, even though they look similar and yet they have very different connotations about her presidency for the next year to come. What do you think, Ms. Lim?
Again, the General Park or President Park Geun-hye's father, President Park Geun-hye, his legacy is even until now very, very strong. Without probably her father's that legacy, probably President Park Geun-hye might have not been able to be elected without, again, that legacy, because I mean, from South Korean people's point of view, that specific period of time, of course, it was painful. Many people died, were killed by under the name of national security law or war. But still, people do sometimes miss that period of time because it was the real moment of the South Korea's economic growth and the development. So still the legacy, my first answer to your question is still the legacy is so strong. But if you think about, President Park Geun-hye's kind of, personal background, she was the only righteous heiress of the President Park Geun-hye, and she was almost regarded as the princess of the whole country. So she has been isolated from the rest of the world. She is almost like a Rapunzel-like on the tower. So that is why probably she is not just crony. I mean, the Choi Soon-sil, she might be almost the only friend or the family member, de facto family member to the President Park. So that is why probably Ms. Choi's, whatever those comments can be, that influential. If she is that influential, many other stakeholders, they will approach to the Ms. Choi because she is that influential to the President Park Geun-hye.
Right.
So I totally agree with what Professor Moon said. That's, again, it's a kind of Korea's problem. At the same time, it's the disincumbent government's actual problem, too, that which makes Korean people frustrated. Yes.
Mr. Yang, of course, we see a lot of street protests these days, hundreds of thousands of people on the streets across the South Korea to demand what is the truth. But you are coming from an observer's perspective, being South Korea's neighbor on China's border and sharing the same issues about, for example, DPRK nuclear program, the crisis related to that. What do you make of what is going on now in Seoul and also overall about President Park?
Well, as a foreign observer neighboring with South Korea, the 2 points the most concerned, at least by me. Firstly, the stability of Park's administration. It seemed to me that no matter what results will be ahead with Park's fate, say impeachment, resign, or no problem. Whatever result will be, the stability of the administration, the credibility of the administration has been seriously damaged. And President Park has entered in the lame duck far before she should be. Okay. Especially the lame duck is very unique based on the political crisis. So that will be a power vacuum. Who will fill up? So that's one problem. The other thing is the continuity of the fundamental policies President Park made. There have been some rumors about the policy making intervened by Ms. Choi. That will brought a lot of uncertainties that are affecting the neighboring countries.
Among those policies, may I raise one part of it, because that is so much under attention of the world, which is concerning DPRK. There has been the close of the Kaesong industrial complex. There has been a distance of the South Korea's relations with the DPRK despite some of the gestures, whether you can look at it positive or not, from Pyongyang, there has also been the THAAD system, which has been a very controversial one. Of course, countries have their own decision-making process, but now in hindsight, people seem to have questions about these decisions as well. Mr. Yang, your take?
Well, I think some people began to question some policy making, like the 2 points you mentioned, are quite reasonable. For example, for the Kaesong Industrial Park, during the past more than 2 decades, there had been numerous crises between the North and the South, but no any crisis or possible conflicts led to the close of the park. Only this time on the park. And by the same token, there have been several years long disputes about the THAAD deployment. And this suddenly they made a decision. So given the background of the intervention by the non-governmental people, so such a question is really has a ground.
I see your point, but we are not going into a geopolitical debate about the THAAD system or about the DPRK relations, but just the fact it is closely related to what is going on in the crisis. Professor Moon, what do you make of it? How much would that have an impact for the next year's whole year policy of South Korea for the region and with China, with DPRK? Yes. Go ahead, Professor.
Yes. First of all, I think we need to focus on the South Korean government, domestic politics. This is a crisis in governance for South Korea. South Korea's 2017 national budget has to be passed by the National Assembly, and this scandal and crisis are going to be holding that process up. The government also has policy for reforms, economic reforms in mind for the chaebol, the conglomerates. That will be held up. South Korea's economy and even the big steel-making conglomerates, they are facing a very, very difficult and possibly a precarious situation of life and death, especially for companies like Daewoo. So economic issues are very much going to be put on hold, and they are vital to the Korean people. Second, South Korea's relationship with the United States is also somewhat in jeopardy because the United States backs South Korea, whether it's THAAD or whether it's on DPRK, ROK relations, whether it's supporting Korea-Japan rapprochement. And so because the legitimacy and the credibility of President Park has declined, anyone who is friendly with her, any government that's friendly with her, also has to face some of these consequences. As far as China goes, I think the South Korean government will right now just pretty much focus on internal affairs and keep foreign policy matters on the sideline.
I see. Ms. Lim, also shed some light for us about this, not only this, but also the upcoming election as well, the end of next year, the biggest election in South Korea. But candidates already feel the nerves these days as a result of the crisis. Opposition, of course, are picking up their support, but we do not know how much they could really be the competitor against Ms. Park and also some of the other candidates. So, Ms. Lim, help us to understand better.
Yang, every South Korean presidential election, it is almost like impossible to precisely predict. Compared to any other country, is almost very, very difficult, especially South Korean presidential election. So it might be too early to judge, or to predict who can be or which party can be competitive, more competitive in the coming presidential election. One thing I can say is the current ruling party, Geun-hye Party, lost its credibility because many actually Korean people do think they already knew this, or they kind of complicity in this kind of criminal issues. So they totally lost their credibility. This is one big thing. But at the same time, the opposition party's leader, they are also very fragmented, and we don't have any one specific candidate who can be really competitive. So I think it's too early to judge. And the American presidential election, that can be influential too, I personally think.
So many moving factors.
We'll have to actually wait.
May I start?
Sure,
Yes.
very briefly,
Hi, may
Professor
I add
Moon.
Yes. I think even before the next presidential election, we have to consider, people are talking about possible impeachment or resignation of President Park. But this is also a very difficult situation because according to the South Korean Constitution, if the president were to be impeached or resign, the government has 60 days to hold a new election. Neither the ruling party nor the opposition party has a candidate that's viable in such a short span of time. So I think we're in a really deep, troublesome time right now for South Korea's future governance.
I see. Mr. Yang, you've been attentively listening to your two other panelists. We have seen some of those candidates emerging. For example, the current UN Secretary General, some were suggesting he might be one of those strong competitors for the future. Having said that, though, what do you make of the short-term already possibility of dramatic chaos in South Korea concerning its politics as a result of the investigation of President Park?
Well, I think if the investigation finds something fundamental violating the law, there will be a broader, greater crisis than now. There may be chaos in South Korea. And regarding to the upcoming presidency, in my view, at least many Chinese view like this way, in terms of the South Korean national interests, no party will win in such a crisis. That's a damage of national interests of South Korea.
Right.
But in terms of the political interests, the current crisis clearly get a good direction to the opposition party. The latest polling has indicated such a trend.
Of course, it's a polling of recent days. We'll see how it evolves. Before we go, I don't want to further complex the crisis, but there is a possibility, and we have to mention that the DPRK nuclear issue, we could expect any news coming from Pyongyang at any time about anything. So, with the crisis going on in Seoul, what mechanism do countries in the region, or South Korea has, or allies have, about any crisis possibility adding to this, the last straw, as they say? Professor Moon, very briefly, we've got 30 seconds for you and the other two panelists. Go ahead, Professor.
You're absolutely right, and I think that this is where China can play a very important role to try to calm the North Koreans down and to remind them that we do not need any more regional complexity in an already difficult situation in the region and on the Korean Peninsula.
And Ms. Lim.
Yes, you're totally right. That's my actually biggest concern too. But again, Republic of Korea is a liberal democracy, which means we do have lots of check and balance system. I totally believe that kind of check and balance, existing check and balance system can contribute to the resilience of the country. That's
Mr.
what
Yang,
I can say.
All right. As we go, we understand this week the biggest military exercise taking place in South Korea, air, ground, and also naval. Of course, this is usually one of those, at least the verbal controversy between South and North. What can we expect, really?
Well, I think that originally, logically, the response from the North will be very strong. But current crisis in South Korea actually play a role to put North Korea in a very difficult dilemma. If North Korea do something provocative to respond, the large-scale exercise domestically for South Korea, that will certainly make a solidarity among parties, among different peoples. That's not North Korea like to see. So I think both the North and the South, under the current situation, should stay in calm, both politically and militarily.
May I say, I really appreciate, on behalf of our audience, for the three of you to shed some light on the very complicated situation. Of course, all the best to the countries involved and certainly to the region's future. Thank you so much, Yang Xiyu, Yu Lim, Catherine Moon. Really appreciate the three of you. Thank you. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, still to come on our program. FBI Chief Comey's last-minute reopening of the investigation into Clinton's emails has been widely criticized, with the U.S. election day looming. Fears grow. This decision may affect the outcome. Can the Democratic candidate now hold onto her lead? You're watching World Insight on CCTV News, coming to you every day from Monday to Friday. The race for the White House is tightening after the FBI renewed its investigation into Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton's use of a personal email server for her government work. Clinton has played down the significance of the FBI decision, yet the inquiry injects new uncertainty into the final days of the presidential race. Jessica Stone has more from Washington.
Hillary Clinton heads into the last full week of campaigning before Election Day, with questions swirling again about her decision to use a personal email server while U.S. Secretary of State. She's trying to refocus voters on the issues.
There's a lot of noise and distraction, but it really comes down to what kind of future we want.
While the FBI cleared Clinton of any wrongdoing in the handling of U.S. national secrets back in July, it has uncovered new evidence in the investigation. That evidence, according to the Wall Street Journal, is more than 650,000 emails found on a computer Clinton's aide, Huma Abedin, shared with her now estranged husband. The FBI reportedly found them in early October while investigating him on unrelated charges. What no one knows, including the FBI, is what's in those emails. Though the FBI has gained access to them, reviewing them could take weeks. Donald Trump wasted no time in calling Clinton a criminal.
She set up this illegal server knowing full well that her actions put our national security at risk.
Let's walk through what we know.
Clinton's campaign has released this online video defending her and calling on FBI Director James Comey to release more information.
So we're calling on Mr. Comey to come forward and explain what's at issue here. So far there's no charge of wrongdoing.
In the latest opinion polls, Donald Trump is now within just a few points of Clinton, a statistical dead heat. And it's clear that the Trump campaign plans to give American voters reasons not to trust Hillary Clinton.
We're again reminded why a majority of Americans already don't trust her or much like her.
The question now is whether these latest revelations will dampen voter enthusiasm for Clinton or even alter the ultimate outcome of the election. Jessica Stone, CCTV, Washington.
And for more on the FBI's renewed investigation into Hillary Clinton's email, we are joined in Chicago by Laura Schwartz, a political commentator and former member of the White House staff during the Bill Clinton years. In Iowa, U.S., we are having Mr. Timothy Hagel, professor of political science at the University of Iowa. And also in Boston, of course, also from U.S., Mr. Luis Costa-Ribas, a political news analyst and also former managing director at the Voice of America. Welcome to the three of you. Big news. Only days before the election. So the question really is, Ms. Schwartz, briefly help us to understand how much will the FBI directors opening to the public about the ongoing investigation impact on the final result of the election? Your analysis.
Well, I think those three vague paragraphs can have an effect, even though we saw the race tightening before that letter was sent to Congress. I think it can have an effect on the independent-leaning Republicans who were either going to vote for Hillary or stay home that may now vote for Trump. But whether or not it has an effect in the battleground states of already where a large percentage of the early voting has been taking place, which means about 20 million Americans have already cast their votes. Before this non-revelation, Hillary may be ahead. So even though the race is settling and tightening, like the Clinton team always thought they would, I don't know the severity of how this is going to affect the battleground states. I think we'll know more in a few days. But it really is disconcerting to see something like this come out so vaguely before the election.
We are going to analyze the motive, if we can at all, about Mr. Comey's decision to do that. But first, let's talk about the election also. To you, Professor Hagel, do you agree with what Ms. Schwartz said? 21 million people have already voted early voting, and plus Mr. Trump, if want to turn the picture around, have to really won some swing states, as well as some of those states already pulling over by Ms. Clinton.
Yes, I would generally agree that with that number of early voting folks. The thing is the people that have voted early at this point are probably folks that are pretty well decided that wouldn't have changed their mind anyway. The thing that I keep waiting to see is what about all those people that really don't like either candidate, that may have voted for one or the other, just as a lesser of two evils kind of situation. And for them, that may actually make a bit of a difference if they've been holding on. And now that difference could be that they just don't vote at all, or they skip the presidential race, or it could potentially shift them over to Trump, whether it's, as was indicated, independent-leaning Republicans or just independents in general who are perhaps tired of the whole mess.
And of course, we do not know how many are they over there. But one thing is interesting, if we look at the polls, of course, it depends on how much you really, want to trust the polls. According to 538, which of course is an aggregate of different kinds of national, local polls, on Sunday, U.S. time, still the number is 21% to 79% supporters for Trump vis-a-vis supporters for Clinton. However, do you think that is likely to change, Mr. Ribas?
I think things may change one way or another, and this is why. If you have 2 or 3% of people that may change towards or away from Hillary Clinton because of this controversy, if she has a good response to the controversy, she can move some of those people back into her column again, because this has been a very volatile election, and the opinions of those people who are not sure if they're going to vote or who they're going to vote for, they are not going to be settled because of these. It is true, like Ms. Schwartz and Mr. Hagel have said, that 21 million people have voted, but another 100 million people are yet to vote. And so even small shifts in a large number of people may have a big impact. However, the most important thing is going to be, as it was said here, and I fully agree, within the battleground states. And in those states, that's where the Hillary campaign is now launching a new phase in response to this controversy, which is, let's get out and vote. This is being done against our chances of winning.
I see.
We need to get out there and vote and not let this happen. I have actually seen emails from the Hillary Clinton campaign to their supporters all over the country asking for more money for get out the vote operations, and also reminding people that no matter what happens, this is the time to get out and vote. So they're trying to mobilize their base, to make sure their base shows up to vote, in order to make sure that they don't lose the election in the home stretch.
That's what Secretary Clinton's base have been doing. Of course, Mr. Trump's base has not been waiting either. They are making their own actions. But Ms. Schwartz, in order to win the electoral vote, here's what I have researched about what Mr. Trump has to do with the states. He has to get the swing states, 3 of them, Ohio, Florida, North Carolina. Meanwhile, he has to secure one state, Utah, which has been quite closely contested by also an independent candidate. Meanwhile, he has to pull over 3 other states, now going to the direction of Secretary Clinton. That is Nevada, Colorado, and Pennsylvania. Of course, anything could happen. Anything could happen in one county that would swing all the state electoral vote to one direction or the other. But Ms. Schwartz, given your knowledge, if the investigation would not come to a close before the election, what is likely to be the difference it's really going to make?
I honestly don't think it's going to be the game-changing decision of this election, and it's amazing how many hours and stories can go into the next 8 days. But I think what's really interesting to look at is that, yes, Donald Trump is expanding the map. He's traveling to other states to try to flip them from blue to red. But he's traveling and holding rallies. Now, Hillary Clinton is too, but Hillary Clinton has more cash on hand. And I hate talking about cash on hand because I don't like the money in politics. But what Hillary Clinton has that Donald Trump does not is an active ground operation of field offices, as was just mentioned, GOTV, get out the vote strategies, and money behind it. And I think those people knocking on doors, talking to voters, getting them to early voting and day of voting, those analytics, that data, I think will count for more than this kind of baked in email investigation that people sort of decided, even before James Comey came out in July saying that it was done, wasn't as much factored in.
Well, Professor Hagel, here's the thing. Mr. Comey, the FBI director, when he made the announcement and the letter public to the Congress, to the general public, he actually has been discouraged by the Justice Department officials and also some of his FBI colleagues. Meanwhile, you also see former Justice Department officials, more than 100 of them, signing petition letters against his decision of going public. And at the same time, there has been very strong, of course, Democrat Party voice against him during this process. He is considered to be a nonpartisan person, at least when he's doing his job. So many would wonder, is this a political suicide bomber against Ms. Clinton? Or how should we interpret this interesting phenomenon?
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about interpreting a phenomenon like this, that you always want to put a particular spin on it depending on your political point of view. When Comey initially seemed to have cleared Mrs. Clinton, the Democrats were extremely happy with him. Republicans were unhappy. It seemed like there was a lot of evidence against her, and yet he was unwilling to recommend charges. Well, now, one of the things that Comey did promise was that he would keep Congress informed, and that's exactly what his letter did. Now, the problem was that it occurred just a few days before the election, and this seemed to break with precedent. But then on the other hand, this is an unusual situation. Precedent probably wasn't going to apply. You also had an attorney general who met privately with the ex-president, who was the husband of the person who's under investigation, and also the Democratic nominee. So basically, James Comey was in a difficult position, that he was going to be accused of hiding and covering up if he didn't say anything until after the election. And if bringing it forward like as he did, he's going to be accused of interfering in the election. And for him, he probably was to a certain extent concerned about not only his own reputation, but the reputation of the FBI, which has taken a lot of criticism over the last several weeks and months. And so he really didn't have a good choice. And to a certain extent, this was probably the best choice for him, simply because it gives an opportunity for both sides to make the way in on it with still a good 8 days at this point, a few more than that at the time they made the announcement, before anything could happen. And of course, the Hillary Clinton campaign is basically saying, look, there's nothing there, and they can continue to make that particular argument. In fact, it seems a little odd that they're putting so much emphasis on this instead of saying, that, look, these are all duplicates, there's nothing there, move on.
But on the other hand, Mr. Ribas, the Justice Department, FBI together, have promised the public to do as much as possible, all resources, in order to finish the investigation before the election day. So are we expecting a really big bomb, whether it is positive or negative against Mrs. Clinton on this investigation, Mr. Ribas?
I wouldn't know, but I can tell you one thing. There's no way they're going to finish the investigation before Election Day. We have 8 days to the election. If we're going to trust the number advanced by the Wall Street Journal, they have 650,000 emails to go through. There's no way in the world they can do that in 1 week. So whatever they promise the public, first they shouldn't promise anything. And this is the basic, I think the original sin in this entire mess was the director of the FBI going to the Capitol and explaining the investigation. You just don't do that. It's not part of the law. It's not part of the requirements. Number two, you should have not promised public updates on the status of the investigation if further information becomes available. That's not the practice or the policy of the Justice Department.
All right.
First you investigate. When you have results, you come out in public. And so, and to conclude straight to your question, no, there's no way they're going to be able to finish these. We don't know what's in those emails. it's certainly ironic that Anthony Weiner, being his family, is now using that destructive character of his to also possibly be destructive to the Hillary campaign. But I don't think we're going to have an answer before election.
All right, before we go, I really want to have the three of viewers answer. In hindsight, once we finish this, one of the most dramatic elections in the U.S. contemporary history, are we going to see a possibility that decision made by one government official or one government department eventually influence the result of a whole election? And what would that mean? Even a slight chance of that, what would that mean about the U.S. election process? Very shortly from you, Ms. Schwartz, 20 seconds if you can.
I think that it could affect down-ballot races and having one person, not just the FBI, especially when the FBI advised him against sending this letter. Yeah, I think it's a travesty to American democracy if it does change the wave of where this is going. Let it be on issues and policy.
We know you're a Clinton supporter. We'll see how things is going. Professor Hagel.
I don't really think that it'll have a major effect on the race, but what it may require is a close look at how our procedures are in place for the next election cycle.
I see. Mr. Ribas, also for you, very briefly.
The saying goes that for Caesar's wife, it's not enough to be honest, it needs to appear to be honest. And the FBI here is at fault, and if there's any change in the results because of that, the appearance of interference by the FBI this late in the game is certainly not helpful for American democracy or democracy anywhere.
We'll see how things evolve. Luis Costa Riba, Timothy Hagel, and Laura Schwartz. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Only a few days to go before the final election.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all we have for today. If you'd like to see more of a program, visit our website. Just type World Insight CCTV News into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian-Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.